We do not do it for the money or the glory. It's not just a job, it is a calling. And there is nothing else that I would rather do.
Interpol connects the world's police forces. For over 100 years, it's helped countries hunt for criminals around the globe. Its strength lies in sharing intelligence and issuing alerts, which can trigger arrests across borders. But now, the BBC, working with the French outlet Disclose, has received a leak from inside Interpol, revealing large-scale abuse of its systems by authoritarian regimes such as Russia.
Traveling is like one of the most dangerous things that I could do in my current situation.
After a year analysing these leaks, we've uncovered hundreds of cases Interpol says broke its rules, resulting in lives turned upside down.
Тебя могут в любой момент остановить, спросить документы, и все, ты поедешь в тюрьму. Ты как загнанная крыса в угол.
До 2013-2012 року я не відчував жодного тиску. Я завжди висловлювався відверто про свої переконання. А до цього я відверто казав, що Путін – це злочинець. Але я потім почав відчувати, що щось гайки закручуються. Це вже було останні мої дні в Росії, коли я вирішив, що я її покидаю.
Eugene Lavrenchuk is a renowned Ukrainian director who ran a theatre company in Moscow until 2014. A few years after leaving Russia, he found himself on Interpol's wanted list. At the end of 2021, during what seemed like a routine business trip, Eugene was taken into custody.
Я лечу з Тель-Авіва у Львів через Неаполь. Було проміжковий контроль, паспортний контроль. І мене там затримали. Підійшов до мене якийсь, який володів англійською мовою, єдиний з них. І в Google-перекладі в програмі не карява, щось таке, щоб були просто ключові слова. Арештований, Москва. Просто вас заарештовано, просто ми нічого не знаємо. А ви дізнаєтеся, буде суд.
Eugene was arrested under what's known as an Interpol wanted diffusion. It's a request from one country to another to detain an individual. Russia accused him of multiple counts of fraud and said that he was on the run.
Жодної правди у звинуваченні мене. Що я ограбив гроші в театрі, але це був мій приватний театр.
Russia alleged that Eugene had encouraged students to take out loans to help pay for repairs to his theatre. It said these loans had not been repaid.
Ну, я не можу про це прокоментувати, я не знаю, що сказати. Цього не було.
Eugene believes the charges were a ruse, cover for his persecution. Within 3 weeks of his arrest, Interpol cancelled the diffusion notice against Eugene. But Russia then submitted a formal extradition request to Italy, keeping him behind bars.
Підтримати затриманого в Італії режисера Євгена Лавренчука зібралися українці в серці Мілана.
В тих обставинах це певний стрес. Та Євгене, все нормально, тебе ніхто не екстрадує. То чому нереальна та загроза цієї екстрадиції в Росію?
3 months later, after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Italy's Court of Appeals ordered Eugene's release.
Моїм звільненням було реакція на звернення міністерки юстиції Італії. Вона каже, негайно мене звільнити, адже я, як громадянин України, під час повномасштабного вторгнення не можу бути екстрадований до країни-агресорки.
It's hard to tell which cases are genuine and which target innocent people. Like Italy, Interpol didn't take a view on the criminal case against Eugene, but cancelled Russia's request because of doubts raised over whether it was politically motivated. Why did Interpol feel that it couldn't trust Russia? Interpol aren't the global police. Instead, they act as a go-between for police forces, like a giant messaging system. A country has different ways to target someone through Interpol. It can issue a red diffusion, like the one for Eugene. This is sent directly between individual countries and asks them to locate and provisionally arrest a person. It can also ask Interpol to publish what is known as a red notice, alerting all member states to do the same. Interpol has multiple safeguards to prevent abuse of its system. One of these is the Commission for the Control of Interpol's Files, known as the CCF. It's an independent body within Interpol which reviews complaints from those already subject to notices or diffusions to decide if they're legitimate. But critics warn that even with these measures, cases still slip through, and some countries use Interpol to target journalists, activists, and people caught in business disputes.
I think they are well aware of that some countries can maybe try to abuse of the system. But on the other hand, I think it wants to preserve police cooperation at any cost.
Charlie Magri is a lawyer who spent 6 years working at Interpol's Independent Complaints Unit, the CCF. He now represents clients who feel they have been wrongly targeted through the organisation.
In its last annual report, the CCF indicated that it received almost 3,000 requests in 2023. So that's a lot of requests.
The number of requests and complaints dealt with by the CCF has been growing for years. But Interpol stopped releasing data in 2018 about which countries are the subject of the cases they receive. Charlie believes this information should again be made public.
Interpol only publishes basic statistics. So it's only the number of notices requested and the number of notices cancelled or refused. But there is no breakdown by country. Without detailed country-specific data, the statistics offer only a shallow view, and it's not real accountability.
But now, for the first time, someone from inside the organisation has decided to provide evidence of how Interpol works and which countries are misusing its systems. We disguise their voice and identity.
I've been working for Interpol for quite a while now. I won't say where. They claim to be transparent, but that's just not true. Everything is on a need-to-know basis, which sometimes is a bit ridiculous because it creates problems.
For over a year, the BBC has been working with journalists at the French outlet Disclose.
There you go.
The source approached us with the documents after seeing how little transparency there was inside the organisation.
There are statistics that are provided internally, and they have an idea. That's why they put countries under restrictions, to prevent misuse.
Interpol can impose corrective measures on countries, adding extra checks to their red notices and diffusions. This isn't usually made public, but in March 2022, Interpol confirmed Russia was under such restrictions because of the war in Ukraine.
I think they want to stay neutral. They say we don't do politics. We don't put countries in the spotlight. I think in the case of Russia, they also didn't want to say, but they felt they just had to.
The source gave us a list of complaints from those on Interpol's wanted list that had been reviewed by the CCF. Where the issuing country is known, Russia has the highest number of complaints about its red notices and diffusions. This has been the case for the last 11 years. And Russia also tops the list for red notices and diffusions overturned. Over half are subsequently cancelled for breaking Interpol rules. The BBC tracked down some of the individuals on the list. people who have been targeted by Russian red notices and diffusions, which were later found to have breached Interpol's rules. Individuals like Igor Pestrakov, a Russian businessman now living in exile in the south of France.
Жизнь с красным розыском Интерпола, если ты террорист, как Усама бен Ладен, для тебя нормально, потому что у тебя все это готово. Если ты добропорядочный, добросовестный гражданин, это на грани суицида.
Соликамский магниевый завод – суверенный поставщик стратегических металлов для российской промышленности.
Igor was once a major shareholder in Russia's rare earth metal industry. In the months leading up to the invasion of Ukraine, Igor says he was asked to stop selling abroad and supply only the Russian market. He knew this meant his products could end up in military hardware.
Ну вот, я был против, да, такой позиции, да, что продавать дешевле, продавать тому, кому говорят министерства. Это не только был вопрос бизнеса, это моральный вопрос. Все же понимали, что никто не хотел участвовать, да, даже косвенно в производстве чего-то, чем убивает людей, да.
Igor says his refusal and the fact that he had a Ukrainian wife led to his companies being nationalized and to him being investigated for financial crimes. He fled Russia in 2022 and applied for asylum in France.
После Навального, в принципе, все поняли, что лучше бежать. Даже если ты полностью прав, даже если закон на твоей стороне.
Despite being in France, Igor worried he could still be a target. He contacted Interpol and was told that Moscow had issued a red diffusion against him. This was despite the organisation announcing there would be tougher checks on Russia following the invasion of Ukraine. He decided to challenge the diffusion through the CCF, arguing it was politically motivated.
То России право нахождения в Интерполе, нажатие вот этой кнопки, заводя туда все, что угодно на тебя, вешая любые преступления, дает право еще тебя и преследовать дальше после того, как ты уехал из России во всем мире.
In spring 2024, after spending almost 2 years on the wanted list, the CCF ruled Igor's case was predominantly political. They said that the information provided by Russia was generic and formulaic, and there had been an inadequate explanation of the alleged crime. Although the diffusion had been lifted, Igor says being on the wanted list had turned his life upside down.
И когда столкнулся с красным уведомлением, то есть твоя жизнь практически меняется полностью. У тебя есть как бы два пути. Прийти в полицию и сказать: я в системе Интерпол. Тебя точно арестуют, тебя точно посадят в тюрьму. Можешь не идти в тюрьму, но ты аренду квартиры снять не можешь сам. Счета банка, понятно, все блокируется. Да? Тебя могут в любой момент остановить, спросить документы, все, ты поедешь в тюрьму. Ты лучше не жить с детьми и с семьей, потому что в любой момент могут вломиться. Да? Поэтому ты как загнанная крыса в угол.
The source provided a second batch of documents. This consisted of communications from authoritarian countries sent via Interpol. If a country wants to find information about an individual, they can use this messaging system to do it, without having to issue a formal notice or diffusion. There are safeguards here too, but, like the first leak, it shows that Interpol has a Russia problem.
My name is Armen, I'm 28 years old. I'm a Russian journalist, currently working from exile. When I was a student in Russia, I founded Doxa, which is an independent online media outlet.
Armen's journalism soon created trouble for him and his colleagues.
Over the time of my work in Russia, the situation for journalists was gradually getting worse.
Doxa's reporting on student protests in favour of the dissident Alexei Navalny drew the attention of the authorities.
I was charged with involvement of minors in dangerous activities. In the end, we spent almost a year under house arrest. In April 2022, we received a sentence, 2 years of correctional labor. But before that, in February, Russia has invaded Ukraine, and Doxa was heavily involved in covering that invasion, the protests that erupted against it. Since we received this sentence and we were no longer under house arrest, we had to use this opportunity to leave the country.
After their arrest, Armen and his colleagues had their passports confiscated. They decided to fly to Armenia, which did not require travel documents.
Yeah, of course, it was a huge relief when they let me through the border control.
After 3 months in Armenia, Armen and his colleagues were able to secure humanitarian visas to go to Germany.
Arriving in Germany felt like a huge relief in terms of like personal safety, because in Armenia maybe we'll be extradited at some point or whatever. But then in Germany it felt like a relief because I'm in a European country, there is like freedom of speech, etc. And this country wants to protect me. This felt like really important for me to have this feeling, to be able to continue our work and to kind of relocate Doxa's operations.
We showed Armen a copy of a message obtained from the source. It had been sent by the Russian authorities to their Armenian and German counterparts using the Interpol messaging system. They ask for his whereabouts, as well as any useful information they have on him. This is the first time he's seen the message.
Emotions, just shock. Yeah, and just trying to process it and to even understand what does this even mean. Yeah, I feel like traveling is like one of the most dangerous things that I could do in my current situation. I don't think they expected that Germany will just send them my address and my phone number and extradite me or whatever, but if they can at least get some sort of tiny bits of information, it's still valuable for them.
We don't know if Germany and Armenia received Russia's message, but our source believes they did.
Russia faces extra checks due to the war in Ukraine. When a country's under restrictions, then all its emails are blocked and checked before being released. But based on the source of this data, I think this message would have passed the checks and would have been delivered.
At the very least, it shows Russia attempting to use Interpol to target journalists.
Russia is under restrictions, and I heard they send 80 to 100 emails a day. It's a full-time job for one person to assess them all.
So does Interpol realise it has a problem? Publicly, it says that the checks and balances introduced over the years have solved many issues. But the BBC has obtained a third batch of documents, which includes confidential memos and emails between executive bodies within Interpol. These include reports showing statistics for how many Russian notices and diffusions passed initial checks in 2024. Despite stricter checks on Russia, Interpol initially approved approximately 90% of its requests. And yet, the reports show that when the CCF were reviewing complaints about Russia's requests, they were still overturning roughly half for breaking the rules. One also notes that Interpol has expressed to Russia serious concerns about the willful misuse of Interpol's systems, stating that there were instances of flagrant violations of its rules. So, what is Interpol's response after years of abuse by Russia and the failure of its safeguards to stop it? In a surprising move, our source told us there's evidence that Interpol has weakened some of its restrictions against Russia.
I was surprised when I learned that it had been casually announced in a team meeting. I later found out that it likely happened months ago. Again, it's just a total lack of transparency.
Почему люди должны вам сочувствовать и симпатизировать вашей истории?
Почему? Нет, не должны. Конечно, не должны. Они должны радоваться, что они оказались не в той ситуации, в которой я оказался. Радоваться, что они могут выйти на улицу, но они могут спокойно идти, их никто лицом в асфальт не положит, потому что он в розыске Интерпола. И так далее. Поэтому пусть не жалеют, пусть радуются. Но те, кто оказался в моей ситуации, берите пример. Вот как-то так, наверное.
In response to our investigation, Interpol said,